Hi, I'm Meta
Hi.
Spencer, and today I get to have a conversation with a very dear old friend, Ayad Alcazez. Ayad and I were just now reminiscing about how we met. We both have the same memory exactly. It was in 1963 in the Berkeley Library, the University of California, Berkeley. We're both sitting at a table. He was across from me, a little bit aside to my left, and he leaned over and asked me the meaning of a certain word. Neither of us remember what the word was, but we both remember that we got acquainted. It turns out that he and I were both beginning in graduate school together at the same time as PhD students. And he had arrived from Iraq with his wife, and they were recently ensconced in the University Village, I think, at that time, weren't you? And so did I. I moved over there about the same time. And we both became graduate students at the same time and took methodology course together from somebody named David. Neither of us can remember David's first name and his surname, but we have very good memories otherwise together. And we've stayed kind of in touch off and on since then, although there have been lapses of 10 or 15, 20 years when I've lost track of. I never lost track of you. I still had your phone number.
Yeah, good. That's good news.
He's been a professor at the University in Sacramento, a state university in Sacramento, California, all along. And you see his house, some of the walls of his Middle Eastern art on the walls of his home in Sacramento. So it is such fun to be back in touch with my dear old friend. Hello, Ayad.
Thank you. Thank you.
You've even written some articles for us for Peace Magazine way back when. And you were pretty engaged at that time in trying to deal with local Arabs in the Sacramento region when the Iraq War was going on. And I always used to consult you about what was going on in Iraq. But I think maybe we won't so much talk about the war or the politics of Iraq today, unless you want to. But you have been giving courses for many years on Middle Eastern culture, Middle Eastern societies. And I think we can get kind of an overview of the main societies in the Middle East that you can give us a picture of. The only Middle Eastern country I've been to is Turkey. So I believe that's one of the three main cultures of the Middle East. And what are the others?
Well, you see, the problem with the term Middle East, it's very difficult to define to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
There are multiple definitions, and it depends with whom you are really talking. Journalists disagree on the definition, politicians disagree, scholars disagree, historians disagree. By and large, on the other hand, Turkey, Iran, and some Arab country are included in that definition. Not all the Arab country. But there are some people, believe it or not, they don't include Turkey in the definition.
Why?
It's really personal preferences. For a while, they considered Turkey part of Europe, especially before Erdogan. The policy was oriented toward Europe. But many scholars, many historians do believe Turkey is part of the Middle East. There's only a small portion of Turkey is part of Europe, geographically speaking.
Yeah, that's where the
That's Istanbul, yeah.
There's one bridge.
Yeah. Well, now I think there are 3 bridges.
Are there?
Oh, yeah, and I think there's also now underground tunnel connecting the two parts and all the business. And by the way, the term Middle East is an ethnocentric term.
Oh,
by the
use the term why?
This is not a term created or coined by indigenous people of the area. Oh. This is a term imposed on them by the outsider. And who are the outsider? European now an American too. So, as a matter of fact, the origin of the term, it started somewhere around 1850 by the British, especially the Indian British, because England treated India as a separate. They have a special office. They call the Indian office. And there are some indication, some people in that office of India used the term Middle East around 1850, 52, 53, etc. But the term became popular after the Second Global War. And
Oh.
that is in the, yeah. Before there was another term called Near East. There are many other terms. I mean, there are all sort of confusion about terms. But the term Middle East is really an ethnocentric, which means somebody from the outside, for whatever reason, they decide to call that area Middle East.
Mhm, mhm.
But this is not a term many people in the Middle East in the past, they don't like it. He said, why the outsider call us up that way? We want to be called Turks or Iranian or Arab, etc., etc., etc. But you know, I mean, history run by the powerful people, and history is dictated by the powerful people. I mean, I don't like that, but these are the reality, the narrative of the situation.
Mhm.
So Turkey, most people consider part of the Middle East, but also Iran is a very important pillar of the Middle East, and some Arab country, not all of them, and including Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, and the Gulf country, they're all considered to be part of the Middle East.
Well, now there are also some other Arab countries that I guess would not be considered. For example,
Well,
Morocco and Algeria. Are they considered
well,
Middle
if you
East?
ask
North
some
Africa,
people,
yes.
yeah, that's correct. Some people will say yes, some people say no. I myself, sometimes to avoid some of the confusion, I say Middle East and North Africa. And
Mhm,
that include Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, Libya, Egypt, and Sudan, etc.
mhm.
So there's, I mean, we can spend hours really on definition.
But
So
then
one way,
at the other end of the Middle East, there's Afghanistan, which I think people would really call um, Central Asian, but not Middle Eastern, although in many ways the culture is closer to being more Middle Eastern or
yeah, yeah, but the moment you include Afghanistan, you include Pakistan. And the moment you include Pakistan, then you may include another. Most of the time, Afghanistan is not included. But I can give you stories in the past about how the State Department defined the Middle East, on how the US policy defined the Middle East. And there's always contradiction. But by and large, Afghanistan or Pakistan is not considered to be part of the Middle East. It's part of what you said, Central Asia, and on and on. But the debate is going to continue, and you really never know what's going to happen.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay, but I tend to automatically associate Middle Eastern culture means Arab, but of course it doesn't
No,
necessarily. No.
I mean, no, that's not exactly correct. The Arab represent the majority. You see, the Arab in terms of population, that's what I mean by majority. Because Egypt alone by itself, right now, over 100 million people. So that gives you an idea.
It's 100 million?
Over
Really?
100 million.
Whoa.
I tell you, when I came to Berkeley, Egypt population was less than 50 million, or much less than 30 or something. But now is over 100 million.
You know, I hardly ever meet an Egyptian. Think of them, 100 million of them out there, and I haven't met more than half a dozen.
Yeah, but I'm sure there are a lot of them in Toronto, by the way, because there are a lot of them in Montreal. For whatever reason is there. But so Egypt alone, it's 100 million. And then you have Sudan, you have Iraq, you have Syria, et cetera, et cetera. When you add them up, they represent the majority of the population in the Middle East. Turkey population is
Now,
about
now, wait a
80.
minute. You're calling the Sudan people Arabs also?
Oh, yeah, Sudan is part of the Arab country. I'm talking about, you see, Sudan now is divided into two countries,
Yeah.
Southern Sudan and Sudan.
Hmm.
I mean, for whatever reason, there's a Southern Sudan, which is a new country established about 10 years ago or more. And then there's the Northern Sudan, but officially it's called Sudan. It is an Arab country. The official language in that country is Arabic. The answer to that is yes. So all these countries are Arab. Now, Turkey population who are not Arabs, about 80 million plus.
Okay, now mostly I think of Sudanese as black. Uh,
Well,
and uh, and of course there are lots of black Muslims, but I don't think of black Muslims as necessarily Arabic.
no, no, there are a lot of black Muslim Arabs, by the way. There are some blacks in Libya who are Muslims.
And they
Uh,
are Arabic.
They are Arabs, yeah, yeah. You see, the term Arab, there is no physical profile of what is the term Arab mean. An Arab can be white, white, an Arab can be black, black, an Arab can be brown. An Arab can have curly hair, an Arab can have a smooth hair, an Arab can have blue eyes or a green eye, it could be anything. It depends on their location. See, part of the reason why there's no physical profile, this area, which we call the Middle East, which include the Arab country, Iran and Turkey and Israel, this had been called the cradle of civilization. Most ancient civilization started in that neighborhood. But also that area, not only the cradle of civilization, had been invaded and re-invaded and reconquered by many outsiders, and including Alexander. I mean, people call him a great. I don't call him a great. What is so great about him? He killed thousands of people. So, and the Roman,
I've heard him called Alexander the Pretty Good, but even not even
if,
that is a generous
if you read
praise.
about the atrocity which he committed, but not only him, all of them. The Roman invaded it. The Mongol invaded the Middle East. The Crusader. All of these people left their own imprint in that area.
Mhm.
You see, a lot of these invaders, they not only invade, but also they get married or they have a relationship with the local woman in that neighborhood. And in the process, there's a lot of mixture.
Mhm.
I have seen, and I'm not exaggerating, white people in the middle of Saudi Arabia. But there are a lot of black in Saudi Arabia who are probably originally from Africa or somewhere else, etc.
Uh-huh.
So the term
These
Arab
sorry,
is
these white people in the middle of Saudi Arabia are a local a community, or you're saying they're scattered among them?
well, they are scattered among them, some of them part of the local community.
Mhm.
There are rumors they are descendant of the Crusader.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Well, I mean, because the Crusader there went for almost 2 centuries.
Mhm.
They build not only they build castles, but
Mhm.
also have family. They have babies. Like what happened in Vietnam. Do you remember what we did in Vietnam? About 500,000 or more. We have a Vietnamese born baby because of the American troops over there. So this is normal in the good old days. That when an army go and invade, they do all sort of other things. So there's no really physical profile of an Arab or a Turk or an Iranian. These are cultural term, not physical term, which because
Mhm.
an Arab can be anybody. I mean, I give you an example. I mean, probably you remember the way how I look, right?
Yeah, but wait a minute. When you say Arab, what would be the defining thing? People who speak Arabic?
Well, I'm going to come to that.
Oh,
But I sometimes I do an experiment in my class. Before I start doing anything, I go on the blackboard. Can you identify my ethnic origin?
oh yeah.
And I swear to you, 90% of the guesses, they are not Arab. They call me Greek, they call me Spanish, they call me Italian, they call me even German or Russian. One guy, he said, you look like Kissinger, and all this
Like
business.
who?
Kissinger, you know Kissinger?
Messenger, you do.
Yeah, I thought that's the last person I want to be identified with.
You don't look like Kissinger. I knew Kissinger, by the way, at Harvard.
Yeah, yeah. But that's the last person I want to be identified as. I
But
call him.
they they knew the students would have known that your name is Alcazaz if they signed up for your course. So
Mhm.
wouldn't that be the totally defining criterion? If your name is Al something or other, wouldn't
That's
make you for sure an Arab?
that's no, not necessarily, because there are a lot of people with AL from Pakistan, from Iran, and somewhere else. But that's a very good point, by the way. When I go and do the experiment, I assume you don't know my name. And I don't say a word, because sometimes the way you talk may also indicate your ethnic origin, etc. It's not a good experiment, but it gives you an idea that it's really very, very difficult to tell based on the way I look or anybody look, etc., etc. I remember I have done a number of experiments. In my class, I have at least two or three people, one of them Palestinian, one of them Libyan, and they are very dark, dark black. What happened? People, they say probably origin they came from Africa. When? Nobody really knows, etc. But all these terms, who is the Iranian, who's a Turk, who's an Arab, who's an Armenian, who's a Kurd, who's an Israeli, these are really cultural terms, like the term American. Is the term, or Canadian, is the term Canadian a racial term? It is a geographical term, maybe, but not a racial term. So what I'm trying to say, that's by the way, one of the purpose of the class is really to discourage people to generalize, to discourage people from jumping to conclusion, because what's true of one nation may not be true of another nation. What is true of one ethnic group may not be true of other ethnic group in that neighborhood, and that's really as simple as that.
Now,
But
is that the main point of Edward Said's book, Orientalism? The main point is don't generalize.
well, that's exactly. Yeah, but Edward Said, he really captured what every other people have said in the past, and he captured it in his sophisticated language. And I remember, I know Edward Said, by the way, he's a friend, and he quoted me in his book, Orientalism.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Well, it's a very small quote. I'm very proud of it, anyhow. And see what happened.
Huh?
But one of the things, this is, by the way, it is done informally. And the last time I saw him, I told him, Edward, you need to hire an editor. He said, why do I need to hire an editor? I'm a professor of comparative literature. Your book is very difficult to read, Orientalism. Have you read part of it or read the book? It's
I
really,
read part of it. I haven't read. I can't say that I'm a master of
it
his.
is very difficult to read.
Yeah.
He remind me of Talcott Parson, our father. Nobody read him now.
No, it's true.
I mean, I
Yes,
don't
I mean,
think
maybe
any.
they do. I don't know anybody who reads them now, but it was certainly hard enough in our day.
Yeah, yeah, no, no. I mean, I read him because it was a required reading. And other than that, I really have no idea what he say. You read a whole page. And you don't, but that's my argument with the people who write complex writing. But anyhow, but Edward Said, he really captured it in three different points. He said Orientalism basically means exaggeration of differences, the inner group and the outer group.
Mhm.
And also Orientalism, it means the superiority of the West.
Mhm.
And Orientalism means using cliche, the stereotype to study the others.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I think that is really what made it very interesting, and it became a powerful in the post modern studies and all this business, etc.
Mhm.
Uh, Unfortunately, he died when he's young, at the age of 67, I think.
Mhm.
But he still his writing is still
Mhm.
very, very, very important.
Yeah. I
So
guess
going, yeah,
if
go.
we're talking about blacks, he would use the word racism. That in a way, Orientalism is kind of the equivalent of racism, but applied to a different population, right?
Definitely, definitely. I mean, it's Orientalism is really a perspective. That's what it is how the others look at the Middle East. If we are discussing the Middle East, or if we are discussing India,
Mhm.
how Europe look at the Middle East, how America look at the Middle East. So there is that lenses which they use. From these lenses, they try to study the Middle East. But these lenses are full with stereotypes, full with disinformation, but they consider it to be fact, and that's a big problem. So Edward Said started to alert us that we have to take with a grain of salt whatever these people are really saying about this group or that group, et cetera, et cetera. So in that sense, it was really a good book or a good, uh, yeah, it's a good book.
Okay, you can get me straightened out about another aspect of Middle Eastern society, and that is Islam. Um, I probably have more, we all have our stereotypes, and that's because we're born in this society and we get the stereotypes that are part of our culture. And I have stereotypes about Islam that
Hmm.
I think maybe I should take a harder look at.
Yep.
uh,
Well,
yeah, what are the problems that arise from our if you say exaggeration of differences about Islamic traditions?
mhm. Yeah, you see, that's a very interesting subject too, is that there is a problem. And Edward Said, by the way, he talked about it. He wrote another book called Covering Islam. And one of the points which he made, and many people had made that point, and I am one of them, is that when you talk about Islam, we are not talking about one group who are Muslims. We are talking about approximately today about 1 billion.8 Muslims. So there are varieties. There are too many of them. Where do they live? Some in Asia, some in Africa, some in Europe, some in the US. And these people are not uniform in terms of their culture, in terms of their tradition, in terms of their history, or in terms of their languages, by the way.
Mhm.
But yet we have a tendency, for whatever reason, to lump them together and we generalize about them.
Mhm.
Why? It's a good subject which you can talk about for ages. I always tell the student, how many of you heard about Mexico? Everybody. How many of you heard about France? Everybody. Do we confuse France with Mexico? No. Why not? They are both Catholic, but we don't confuse them. France and Mexico are two separate community, different tradition, etc., etc. But when it comes to the Muslim, for whatever reason, we tend to lump them together.
Mhm.
And my feeling, that is not a good idea. That's not the way to study societies. There are how many countries are Muslim? Probably about 50 countries has a majority Muslim, and about 30 countries have a very significant Muslim minority like India, etc. Is the Indian Muslim like the Egyptian Muslim? The answer to that is no. Is the American Muslim like the Egyptian Muslim? The answer to that is no. They share one thing in common, but there are a lot of differences. So we really cannot generalize about them.
Mhm.
But in the mass media in this country, I'm talking about the US and probably in Canada too, but I haven't followed the press in Canada, though there's a tendency to lump them together. And what I'm trying to say, and many people are saying, we cannot do that. We have to separate them because what's true of an Egyptian may not be true of the Saudi. I
Yeah.
give you one example.
Okay.
Uh, until about 2 years ago, if you are a woman in Saudi Arabia, you cannot drive in the urban center, not in the desert, but in the city. And that's another thing. Well, the Saudi one, but in the desert they can, but in the city they cannot. Now they removed it. But many people, they take the Saudi example and they think all Muslim women cannot drive. That's not true.
No.
I know in Iraq they drive, in Yemen they drive, in Qatar, everywhere they drive. Even the Saudi, they drive outside Saudi Arabia. So, but we have that tendency. And that is why, I mean, all of us, we think in a stereotype. You see, this is the problem. The human mind thinks in a stereotype because an easy way to understand and explain any phenomena. Because if you try to study every single question you've been asked, you have no time to do anything. So stereotype, for whatever reason, I think is part of our humanity as a human. And so we tend to use the stereotype to make life easy for us, to simplify things. But that has a consequences. Sometimes we may kill people because of the stereotype.
Yeah.
So it is really, I mean, it's a very complex situation, and I don't know if there's a beginning or an end.
Okay, look, I have only about 3 categories of Muslims in my head.
Okay.
No, I got a fourth one. I've got 4 terms that I identify as types of Muslims. There's Sunnis and Sufis. I mean, Sunnis and Shia.
Mhm.
And then I have, which I guess if we had Venn diagrams, they'd be overlapping or something. Then there's this thing called Sufi, which is neither Sunni nor Shia. And then I met somebody who's something Alev or Levi or something like that.
Alawi,
Yeah.
yeah.
And they're, I guess, Turkish, I think. Anyway, and these are not, well, there are 2 branches. Like within Christianity, there'd be Protestantism and Catholicism,
Yeah.
but then you'd have some other weird variants, right?
Yeah,
Now, straighten me out. Just give me a bunch of categories, and imagine that they're doing Venn diagrams, overlapping circles. Which are the incompatible ones? You can't be both a Shia and a Sunni, can you?
Well, you cannot, but some people, they think I am neither Sunni nor the Shia. I'm just a Muslim.
Okay, but you couldn't be both. Okay, now I've got those are two circles that are separate, but then there's some other circles that I don't know the connection to.
Yeah, well, I tell you, Islam, like any other religion, when you talk about 1.8 billion people, you're bound to have differences. Differences in terms of the basic ideas about their faith, differences in terms of their tradition, differences in terms of the way they look at history, their narrative, etc. But the 2 main divisions in Islam are the Shia and the Sunni. But the majority of the Muslims are Sunni. How big is the Sunni majority? It could be 80 to 85 or 90%. And the Shia are a minority within the Islamic faith. But, and this is a big but, when we talk about 10 or 15 or 20% out of 1.8 billion, you talk about 200 million or more who are Shia. So it's a very significant community within the Muslim community. In addition to these differences, there are varieties of subsects. I mean, somebody claimed that the Shia themselves have about 70 different subsects. The Sunni have different school of thought among themselves. And then you come to the Sufi, which is somewhat different in terms of their style of worship. But there are Sunni Sufi and there are Shia Sufi. And then there are splinter group from the Sunni or the Shia. They are really far away from the faith itself. They become separate. They are no longer considered to be Muslim.
Okay.
And there's a lot of debate about the Alawi of Turkey. Some of them live in Syria too, by the way, whether they are really Muslims or not. So, but that's normal. When you talk about too many people, you are going to have differences and variation, et cetera, et cetera. But the main one are the Shia and the Sunni, and the Sufi. In Egypt, there are a lot of Sufi people. The Sufi, they tend to be very quiet. They don't interfere in politics. They are called Musalimin. They are peaceful people, and they tend to follow the government. and all this business. But today, the tension going on between the Sunni and Shia in terms of politics, not in terms of faith. I mean, a part of the problem, and I think this is my view about religion in general, not only Islam, is that the main idea may be the same, but the people who practice it, they have their own private motivation in terms of power, in terms of control, in terms of other things.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, they try to manipulate their ideas in order to fit their ambition. So that is part of the problem. Politics had interfered with religion, and politicians are using religion to promote their own private goal or their own objective.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why we have a problem. On the other hand, when you study objectively as much as you can, Sunni and Shia, there are not really much differences between them.
Yeah.
They all believe in one God. They all believe in the Quran. They all believe in the Prophet. But they disagree about something started as politics and then became theological.
Mm-hmm.
When Muhammad died, who's going to replace him? Not as a prophet, to replace him as a political leader. And this is how the split started, by the way. So they compete with each other, and everybody brings his own evidence. But in the process, they start fabricating evidence to support their ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really what happened. But today we have Iran at the center of the Shia Islam, and we have other countries, most of them are Sunnis. But there are Shia Islam in Iraq, there are Shia Islam in Bahrain, Shia Islam in Lebanon, in Pakistan, in Saudi Arabia, etc., etc. And the tension is really political, not theological.
Mm-hmm.
Has nothing to do with Islam, but they have to cover it up. They have to put it in a way that make it acceptable to the people, etc., etc. I mean, the other day I read a very interesting comparison between the Shia Muslim and the Catholic.
And the what?
The
Catholics?
Catholic, yeah. I mean, in terms of their basic belief, they said a lot of tradition within the Shia tradition are influenced by the Catholic tradition. One of them is the Passion Play. You know the Passion Play? The
Yeah,
commemoration of the death of Jesus.
right. You
This
have
is, yeah, we have that, but not of Jesus, of a different martyr called Hussein.
oh.
I mean, there are a lot of them, and in the Catholic, they worship, they respect the mother of Jesus,
Uh-huh.
and the same thing within the Shia tradition. They respect the mother of Hussein, which is the daughter of the Prophet, etc.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's a lot of. I mean, that's normal. I mean, I call it that's normal. We borrow from each other.
Mm-hmm.
But we give it different color. We call it that Shiism. We call that Catholic or something of this sort. But it's
They
all.
say that even Catholicism, that a lot of the early traditions and even holidays were
Go
days
ahead.
Romans had that they simply changed the name
They are Roman, yes, yeah,
to represent a saint or something.
yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, that's no, no, that's very true. I mean, and I mean the Orthodox they celebrate Christmas in January, and the other they celebrate it at the end of December. Yeah,
Mhm.
I mean these are all pagan ideas, etc. But that's very, very normal. I mean, the story. I mean, I mean this is very interesting what you just said. I mean the story about Moses and how he was put in a basket in the sea, and then the Pharaoh picked it up. And that is an old story in the Sumerian tradition.
Really.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you read about the Sumerian, their king. For whatever reason, they put him in a basket, and it was uh, moving along in the sea, and somebody on the other side picked him up, and later on he became the head of the Sumerian, etc., etc. I mean, the tradition, they have all sorts of stories, and everybody picked up from this tradition. And that's the way it is. That's the way it is. But unfortunately, politicians use it to their own advantage. And in the process, people die. In the process, people lose their life because they'll be fighting and there will be animosity, and that's the way it is.
That's like, the fights between Catholics and Protestants in Ireland. It's really
Yeah, yeah,
not about religion. It's about ethnicity and
yep.
who's got which groups have power. But, today within Christianity, I would say Christian doctrine even is changing, and they change it. Even the Pope changes his mind about what's acceptable and so on.
Yes, yeah, yeah.
And now priests are women, and all kinds of changes are taking place. I belong to a congregation in which an Anglican group in which a lot of the people say they're atheists. I don't understand how you can be a Christian atheist, but okay, whatever. Um,
Well,
but I wonder if I don't, maybe here you can set me straight. I don't know that there's that much change taking place within Muslim theology or Muslim practices, liturgical practices and so on. Is
yeah.
much going on in terms of change?
Well, sooner or later it will happen. I mean, it is too early to say that we need to change everything in Islam drastically. How many centuries it took for the Christianity to change, starting in the 1500s and till the present, and continue to evolve? And I have a feeling that's what's going to happen in Islam. And so you have to give it some time. It's not going to happen overnight or today or tomorrow. But overnight, over the years, things is going to change. And I have a feeling, and this is my own feeling, that Muslim in America, they are going to be uh, the the pace setter for change. There are a lot of Muslims within America. They are talking about a lot of things which need to be discussed and would need to maybe modified, et cetera, et cetera. So I have a feeling in the coming a few decades, things may change. And that will affect not only the Muslim in America, but also a Muslim in other country and on and on. For example, let me give you an idea. I mean, you read the Quran, they say if you are a man, you can marry up to four.
Mhm.
But that's really a misreading of the Quran, because the Quran also say in that verse, you can marry four, but if you cannot deal with them equally, you are supposed to have only one. So the government of Tunis, based on this verse in the Quran, said polygamy is no longer acceptable. You cannot do that. So the law in Tunisia said monogamous marriage is the only form of marriage. And that's the case in Turkey, by the way. And Turkey, 80 million people. So there are a lot of countries reinterpreting
Mhm.
a lot of relationship. And that's what's going to really to happen. The idea a man inherited twice. So there are a lot of countries that are using different interpretation in order to avoid all these things. But it's going to take a while.
Mhm.
Part of the reason we have too many Muslims, and that is going to be a problem. But the good news, many times a change took place in one country may affect another country, neighboring country, or a country a little bit further down. So to go back to the question, there will be change, but the change is going to be gradual and it's going to take time.
Mhm.
And I think we already seen some of the things happening, whether among the Muslim theologian of the U.S. Muslim community, or even in the Middle East or in some other Muslim country. I mean, who thought, for example, a 3 or 4 Muslim country, their leaders are Muslim women.
Oh, are there really?
Even today, Bangladesh, which is a country of 130 million, the leader is a Muslim woman.
Okay.
The country of Singapore, this country is not a Muslim country, but the head is a Muslim woman.
Mhm. Okay.
And in Pakistan, but she died, she was murdered. Prime Minister of Pakistan, Benazir Bhutto, was a woman.
Right.
In Turkey, where you visit, so I forget the exact date, but about 20 years ago, 30 years ago, maybe more, maybe less, he was a woman, the prime minister of Turkey.
Beautiful woman. I
And
remember her. Yes.
yeah, so there are a lot of things happening, but it's going to take a while. I mean, you cannot really change 1.8 billion all of a sudden. It's going to take a while.
Right.
But on the other hand, what is postponing this process is really the stereotype. these negative things toward the Islam is postponing the process of change or the reformulation of their
Mhm.
uh, thinking about what's really what is happening. But I am really optimistic about it and think definitely is going to move in the direction of what happened in Christianity. But
Well,
that doesn't mean
what about the young people, the young Muslims in America, or for that matter, Canada? I don't know that many. Would that be the source of the impetus for change, or are they as fairly traditional as a rule?
well, I think you hit on a very important point. The new generation are somewhat different. You see, once you live in this country, parents try to control their kids,
Hmm.
but the reality they cannot.
Yeah.
And most of the kids, they are influenced by the peer group and by the school they go to, by the friend they associate themselves. So there are a lot of changes among them in one fashion or another.
Hmm.
And that's a very important cause for the change,
Hmm.
not in the center of belief, but in the behavior.
Hmm.
I mean, behavior always change. I mean, true yesterday may not be true today, may not be true tomorrow. So the answer to your question, yes, the new generation are going to move in that direction.
Hmm.
There's another things happening, by the way, in the Muslim in America, and I think even in Canada. In the good old days, who are the Muslim theologians in this country? They are all trained overseas. They are all born overseas.
Hmm.
But now we have seminary in this country. Their purpose is really to to train specialists in Islam, train in this country, not in Egypt, not in Saudi Arabia, not somewhere else.
Hmm.
And these people, they speak English like anybody else.
Are
They
they
are not different.
Americans mostly,
They are
or
American. They are American.
they're
No, no, they are born in this
American?
country.
Okay,
And their thinking is going to be very, very different.
right.
And it's happening. It's still the beginning. I mean, I think there's about 2 or 3 seminaries established recently. And believe it or not, they got a grant from U.S. government indirectly or Christian foundation indirectly. And the whole idea to train theologian in this country. And if you are going to train them, they are going to be very different.
Mhm.
They are going to look at the situation differently, and they are going to take into consideration the local tradition in this country.
Makes
And
sense. I remember about 15 years ago, we had a conversation in Peace Magazine about that very idea, because
uh,
the University of Toronto has a number of colleges that are separate for different faiths. There's an Anglican college, and people prepare there to become priests,
mhm,
Anglican priests. And there's St. Mike's, which is that is Catholic, and there's Knox, which I guess is Presbyterian. I don't even know what they all are, but they
mhm,
are. But there is a school of theology that they share
mhm,
certain things together. And the
mhm,
idea was, well, we don't have. First of all, there is no Jewish. What would be the seminary? I don't know what they call them, yeshivas or whatever. But there's no Jewish training. I think all rabbis in Canada go to the U.S. People are trained in the U.S. And
mhm.
there is nothing. There's no Muslim training in Islam. In fact, I don't even know whether they give courses in Islamic theology anywhere at the University of Toronto. I haven't looked into that. But the idea was, why aren't these people included in part of the program? They should have their own training program. Yeah.
I think part of the reason the number used to be small, but now the number of Muslim is exploding. Because I remember, and I'm giving you an example of Sacramento. When I came to Sacramento in '69, there was only one mosque like a church, a mosque like a church. Now we have 25,
Hmm.
not in the Sacramento city, but in the surrounding area, including Davis, Rosefield, et cetera, et cetera. I think as the number expanding, then the need to train your own student in theology is becoming more and more important.
Hmm.
There is a need in this US. Why? Because the Muslim in the US is estimated between 5 to 8 million people. I mean, in Sac State, among the faculty, there's about 20 Muslim faculty. I mean, that's quite a bit.
20
Uh,
faculty members, locate departments.
in different departments, I mean, they are engineers, they are sociologists, they are political scientists, they are so and so, etc. They are not theologians, but they are the student. I mean, just the number. We have about 500 Muslim students in Sac State. That's a lot of students. So now there's a need. Once the number is getting bigger and bigger, then there is a need. But when the number are few, nobody care. And that's really what is happening. I mean, this is a new phenomenon, establishing a seminary to train Muslim to be specialists in Islamic theology and to be imam or a priest or a minister within the Muslim faith. That is going to be very, very new. There are a number of attempts. I don't know if you heard about them. In the Islamic tradition, to be an imam, you have to be a man. For both men and women, imam. A woman cannot be an imam only for women, but not for both. Now there are some people in this country that are pushing the idea, no, she can't be for both. It is not a successful attempt, but they're trying it.
No, wait a minute. You're saying that a woman could be an imam, but her flock could only be women.
Woman, yeah.
Yeah, and now they're saying she could also be an imam to men, which would give her a certain kind of authority. Is that right?
There is an attempt.
Okay.
There is an attempt, but this attempt may be magnified in the coming few years, et cetera, et cetera. So there is a lot of changes going on, but it's going to take a while to gel. It's going to take a while to formalize and become part of the grid, et cetera, et cetera. But it's going to take time. It's not easy to change tradition. I mean, that's part of the problem. Once it is established, it's very difficult to change.
Okay.
But I'm hopeful, by the way.
Good. Okay. Well, I'm hopeful too, because I've talked to you and it's really wonderful.
Thank you.
I have to call this to a close now because my assistant has just informed me that I'm due for another meeting. I'm overdue. So I have to go. And this
okay, well, we can continue some other time if you're in the mood.
Again, absolutely. There's more to be covered, I think, when we talk about Middle Eastern societies. Thank you so much, Ayad.
You are very welcome. It's a wonderful opportunity. Thank you for asking me. Thank you.
Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.